Now joining us is Elton Hart from the University of Johannesburg Law Clinic. Elton, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on Newsfeed PM. Well, you heard the arguments from both sides again today. Advocate Dalimpofu saying that this case is dead on arrival, it's dead in the water. Your learned opinion on that?
Yes, if one looks at it, and I tend to agree with Advocate Mpofu with his arguments, because what the ANC is failing to do is to actually show that they've got locus stand, and also pertaining to jurisdiction, they're falling short on their arguments there. And how they structured their application when they challenged the use of the logo initially in the Durban High Court, it was with their papers were drafted in a way that it speak to the May 29 polls. And now it seems like arguing from the podium, the legal team, maybe most probably on the instruction of the ANC, is now trying to actually work into the leave to appeal future elections and future happenings that they call future infringements. So for me, when you deal with appeal, when you take something on appeal, what is on the record, what's in your pleadings, is what the court will be busy with deciding, is there room for another court to come to a different conclusion. And I think they're trying now with sneaky lawyering to actually try and bring in additional things for the court to say, okay, maybe if you put it in that way to say that future elections, it might affect the ANC's results. Maybe another court will come to a different conclusion and say, with the similarities that is between the logos of MK and the former Nkonde Wesizwe that was banned, maybe there's something for the ANC to latch on.
So, Elton, would you say, what's the better option here for the ANC? Should they scrap this appeal, just leave this case, and then start a fresh one that talks about the future trademark infringements?
I would have thought they would have left this when the court made that ruling back. I think it was somewhere around April, I think they made that ruling. I would have left it at that and say, okay, let's look now in the future. What is the MK party doing that's infringing upon our right, our title to the Nkonde Wesizwe trademark? Because it was not about more or less, and I think there was something about the similarities, but it's not more or less about the similarities, it's more about the reputation. But I think in future they might also have difficulty, because the ANC themselves is the ones that actually went on public platforms, on social media, on national TVs to say that the MK has been disbanded. It's no longer part of the ANC. So at one stage you'd said, this is no longer part of me, and somebody picks it up and says, okay, I'm going to polish it and make it look nice, and we're going to run with it. Now you want it back because it's shining. So I think in future they might have a problem there.
And I think that's one of the arguments that Advocate Dalimpofu raised as well, to say, look, this has been disbanded since 1993. To use your analogy as well, this was basically a discarded toy that didn't have any use anymore, and now somebody else has picked it up and decided to polish it, make it look a little bit more shiny, make it look a little bit more attractive. And now we're saying, no, but this is still our own. And what I noted as well at that media briefing earlier, the SG of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula, constantly referring to the MK party now as the Zuma party. What message does that say? If like already we're referring to it, he's referring to it with a different name and no longer using it as the name that it's been registered for, is it almost preempting the win, or for perhaps preempting the loss and saying, look, we still will not call it by this name regardless?
I think it's most probably just to say they defy whatever former President Zuma was busy with, to say that we call it the Zuma party and not the MK party, because it's, for all intents and purposes, in the eyes of South Africans, the Electoral Commission, it's registered as the MK party, which is Nkonde Wesizwe. So what he calls it, I don't think will bother them much, but also sometimes it's also sort of have to sensationalize things, to sort of have try and maybe influence a decision. Maybe you start saying, okay, the Zuma party, you start spreading some sort of a rumor just to maybe make people think about it. And for me, I don't read anything into it. For him, it's him and his party. He must now come and prove to the court, or they've now put their case before the judge there, and the judge will make a decision, which I think the judge will rule in favor of MK, and it's up to them. And whatever they're going to do in future, I think they've got an uphill battle to actually get the MK thing back. And one should never lose sight of MK was a formation of a lot of parties back then. It was not only a product that belonged to the ANC. Maybe the ANC was one of the influential players there, and people should never forget. Although MK, it was like the UDF, you had the South African Indian Congress, the South African Colored Congress, there was various other stakeholders and role players, even PAC, Azapu, Azania, all of them came together and said, we form MK. So MK doesn't exclusively, so these other parties, so that I think might be raised in future arguments if they're going to still drag MK to court with this one.
So what are the options should the ANC lose this case? If they're saying, you know, going back to that analogy, I quite liked it. We don't necessarily want this thing. We're not necessarily using it, but we don't want you to use it either. So what channels can they then explore should they lose this case? And are there any such channels past this appeal?
For me, obviously, they've got a right to appeal any decision that a court makes up until the Constitutional Court, if there's a constitutional element captured somewhere in that case. If there's no constitutional element and they're just going straight on trademark law and everything, I think the buck will stop in Bloemfontein. So they will have most probably go from this court maybe to say, go to the full bench, then go to the SCA, and if there's no constitutional, that's where it's going to end. So they have the right. I'm not saying that they will be successful, because currently from where I'm sitting, I don't think that they've got a strong case to make out at this point in time, pertaining on various things like local standard jurisdiction. And also, I think the judge back then, and rightfully pointed out by Advocate Mpofu, the court had to just look at, was this thing urgent? No, it wasn't urgent. Off my court roll. Come back later and come and argue it. Maybe they would have then maybe checked for future by-elections, future elections, to bring it in their papers. But from where I'm sitting, I think they've got a pretty steep hill, and I don't want to sound as if I'm siding with MK, but just looking at the legal arguments and what's legally available to them, I think it's a tough call. And the problem is that I don't know, was it clever of them to actually split these two issues to say one runs to the electoral court and one runs to this side? Maybe they should have waited just a little bit to say, let's see if the MK party gets deregistered. If not, then we will, at a later stage now, based on that ruling, then we approach a high court to say that this is our trademark, it belongs to us, and it's infringed, and it's continuously to be infringed, and not just look at it for the May 29 polls. I think that would have been a wiser thing, but I think they were already afraid of what MK is going to do in the voter numbers, hence they rushed things, and them rushing things actually sort of have flawed their chances of success.
Yeah. You know, you're mentioning it could go obviously all the way to the Constitutional Court. Should there be some sort of constitutional argument and value that it can bring forward? Just looking at it at face value, looking at those arguments, is there any constitutionality out of it that can be brought out to say, actually, this can be argued in the Constitutional Court?
The thing is, like, remember now, one needs to look at, in the papers currently before court, they sort of have had urgency, that ownership, and although this court did not out and out speak to the ownership or dismiss the ownership claims, that is where it is, and then obviously jurisdiction. So there, for me, I don't see anything constitutionally, but maybe most probably if they come in future to say, okay, our right as a political party, association with our members, they might make out a case, but it will be very difficult. I can't now, from what I see is available to me, that there is a constitutional argument that they can raise at this point in time to actually advance their case in the apex court if it gets to that point. If for some odd reason the Durban High Court comes back and say, I'll give you leave to appeal, and you go to the full bench and you progress up, and they most probably dismiss, so that you go to the Constitutional Court. At this point in time, what's before court is the record, and they are bound by that. I don't see anything constitutional that they can raise at this point in time, because if there was something, they would have raised it by now.
Sure. An uphill battle ahead, truly. Elton, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That's Elton Hart from the University of Johannesburg.